The oldest religion that still exists is the ancient Persian faith, Zoroastrianism. There's only about 200,000 people that belong to that religion in the world, and about 20,000 of them live in the United States and Canada. There are a few temples scattered around the United States. There's one in Texas, oddly enough, some in California. And you can visit them, but you cannot join them. You cannot convert to Zoroastrianism. You cannot even marry into the Zoroastrian faith. Their priests will not perform interfaith marriages, and they will not recognize a marriage of one of their membership to a person of another faith. Because they have always had fair equality in men and women, they have a lot of professional women among Zoroastrians, which means they have a lower birth rate, which inevitably means that though they have now survived for over 3,000 years, they are nearing their end. Of course, in the beginning, they worked hard to convert and recruit new members, but under persecution, particularly under the spread of Islam 1,500 years ago, they closed their ranks, and you couldn't join a Zoroastrian temple anymore, and so they have been diminishing in size and in influence ever since. The more common ancient faith is Judaism, also declining in numbers, particularly during the Holocaust when more than half of the living Jews in the world were killed. You can, however, convert to Judaism if you want to. You have to really want to, though. Unlike most Christian denominations that have a fairly low threshold of membership requirements, it takes at least 2 years and a great deal of study, including at least a rudimentary knowledge of Hebrew. And men, even if they've already been circumcised, have to endure a symbolic bris, at least drawing blood, in a place that we would prefer to have left alone. As you can imagine, there's not been a whole lot of people lining up to join Jewish synagogues. And marriage to a Jew doesn't really help to speed things along. Again, the Jewish faith went through periods of time of enthusiastic evangelism. But like the Zoroastrians under persecution, they closed ranks, and they have not been eager to gain new members. In fact, a part of the conversion process, if you decide that you want to become Jewish, you have to have a meeting with a rabbi who tries very, very hard to talk you out of it. Persecution, a Holocaust, a few incidents of ethnic cleansing will do that to you. You can point to lots of examples of how persecution of any religious group actually helps them to get more committed to their religion, but it doesn't do much to help them recruit new members. In the early days of the Christian movement, one of the burning questions was whether or not the Jesus movement would be confined only to those who actually knew Jesus, that the Jesus movement might just be for Jesus' personal friends and followers, his disciples who had been with him during his ministry. And if not that, could it only be Jews? Was the Jesus movement a reform movement within Judaism? But by the time the movement was in full swing, there was a major effort on the part of the Roman government to wipe out Judaism through ethnic cleansing. The early Jesus people who had not been sure whether or not they were Jewish or whether they were something else, when Rome started killing off Jews in the tens of thousands, they decided that they were something else. They were a new religion. Frankly, as a historian, I doubt that Jesus would have agreed with that. But at the time, he had been dead for a half a century. I'm pretty sure that Paul wouldn't have agreed with it either, but he was also dead at the time that decision is made. The author of Acts, we call him Luke. We have no idea who really wrote Acts, but probably the same person who wrote the gospel that we call Luke. That author was attempting to influence the decision, the direction of the early church there near the end of the first century. Now, that author was not in Jerusalem on Pentecost when the events he described took place. Whatever really happened on that day, Luke is certainly taking liberties with the account in order to make a theological statement more than he was trying to make a description of historical events. Luke is trying to influence what the Christian religion is going to be by placing an authoritative decision way back in its history. At a time when Christians were still using secret symbols to mark their meeting places, where they were literally trying to keep their heads low so that no one would notice them, no one would know where they were meeting, no one would know that they were members of this movement, Luke is attempting to blow the cover of the church, permanently opening the doors to all comers. Now, if you had been a Polish Jew in Warsaw who survived the Holocaust, how many years after the end of the Holocaust would it be before you would be excited to welcome a former Nazi into your fellowship? If you had grown up in the West Bank without electricity, without running water, in a mud hut with dirt floors, without access to education or medical care, how quick would you be to make friends with your Jewish occupiers? Or if you were a Native American who grew up on a reservation in a society blighted by drug and alcohol addiction, unemployment, poverty, and poor education, would you want to go to someone's Columbus Day cookout? Luke was living and writing during the height of the Roman persecution of the Christians, and he was saying to them, let's stay open-minded. Let's not be angry. Let's not be prejudiced against our persecutors. Let's welcome Greeks and Romans, Parthians and Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt, and parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs, blacks and whites, Anglos and Latinos, gay and straight, Democrats and Republicans, capitalists and socialists. When I have a cookout in my backyard, I tend to invite liberals who are progressive thinkers. My daughter is moving to Denver this week, and most of you know how relieved I am to get her out of Dallas before she married some Republican cowboy down there. Who are we, though, as open-minded, liberal progressives, if we are only comfortable being around people who are like us, who agree with us? Honestly, I'm not sure that I would have agreed with Luke at the time that he wrote this Pentecost narrative. I'm not sure that I feel it in my gut right now, but I'm pretty sure that he was right. I think he was asking us to try harder. In fact, to be completely honest, this text that was radical and countercultural at the time that it was written 2,000 years ago can hardly be said to be adequate for 2015. The question is not whether you can join a Zoroastrian temple or whether you can become a member of a Jewish synagogue or a particular Christian church. The question is more, why would you? Why would you convert from one religion to another? Luke encouraged the early Christian community to embrace the world, to not limit themselves to being a reform movement within Judaism. Luke believed that the gospel belonged to everyone. And that was a bold, inclusive, and open-minded thing for him to say back then. For us, in a world where you can speak to someone on the other side of the globe as easily, and in my case, more easily, than you can speak to your next-door neighbor, the question is no longer whether or not I will let you join my religious club or if you will let me join your tribe, but rather it is, can we accept one another the way we are without having to change, convert, or in some way adapt each other? Now, I want to be clear, I'm not trying to be relativistic about this. I understand better than most that there are healthy forms of religion and there are unhealthy forms of religion. I don't need to persuade Catholics to leave the Catholic Church and join our progressive movement. But that won't stop me from encouraging the Catholic Church to get real about allowing women to manage their own reproductive lives and to get over their centuries of prejudice against female priests, and to stop their silly condemnation of homosexuality when 3/4 of their clergy are obviously gay. I don't need to convince any Muslims to abandon their religion and become Christian, but I will continue to encourage Muslims to come into the 21st century, which means giving up on Sharia law and to embrace the equality of men and women and of gay people and straight people. I would remind them that Muhammad said that the greatest of the jihads is the internal jihad. It is dealing with your own life, not managing the lives and shortcomings of others. And the largest of the world's religions, Christianity, is the fastest shrinking, according to the recent Pew poll that shows a sharp decline in the percentage of Americans who identify themselves as being Christian. The Christian religion has blood on its hands and, frankly, intellectual manure on its boots. And I don't blame people for no longer wanting to be a part of the tribe. But my suggestion is that it is time, if not for an exodus, it is time for a reformation. It is time for all of the religions of the world to be rooted in reality and to work to free the world of prejudice, war, greed, and the systematic destruction of the planet so that we can not only accept one another, but so that we can love one another and create a world that is safe for human life and all other living things. I join my voice today with the voice of the Dalai Lama, who has said, we need now to employ a secular approach to ethics. Secular in the Indian sense of respecting all religious traditions and even the views of non-believers in an unbiased way. Secular ethics rooted in scientific findings, common experience, and common sense can easily be introduced into the secular education system. If we can do that, there's a real prospect of making this 21st century an era of peace and compassion. May it be so.
You have been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at Rev. Dr. Ray at AOL.com for more information.